104.5 The Team, your home for New York sports. We are now joined by Jorge Sedano. Of course, every Monday you can catch him on Nacion ESPN. That's 5 o'clock Eastern. First things first, man, I saw you guys did a great interview with Gary Sanchez. My only problem is it's the most reading I've done all week.
Yeah, sorry about that. He felt more comfortable doing it in Spanish, so we said, all right, let's roll with it in Spanish. The three hosts obviously are all Hispanic, so that made it a little easier for us to do it. And, you know, the producers had to translate and put subtitles. But, hey, man, it was only 2 minutes and 45 seconds, all right? So relax.
But Sedano, it was cool because it actually is the first time I've really seen him do an interview. What did you take away from your interaction with Gary Sanchez?
He's very, straightforward, almost kind of almost like, and I don't want to call it naivete, but just kind of he says what's on his mind, which I don't feel like he's guarded yet, which is funny because generally in sports, most of our athletes are very guarded, and he doesn't. He says what he thinks, and I think a lot of that is youth, right? Like, as he gets older, he probably won't be as forthcoming with us as he was. You know, not that we were asking him all these crazy, hard-pressing questions, but I generally felt like that. Like, he's definitely young. He's definitely a guy that, lets it fly a little bit on his thoughts and doesn't really think of any potential repercussions. But being in New York, I'm sure that'll all change very quickly.
But there's no concerns now that even after this great rookie season he's had, that he's just a flash in the pan. We see some staying power with Gary Sanchez, right, for Yankee fans?
Yeah, I think so. Now, look, he was never projected to be this. In the minor leagues, I think this is even a surprise for people thought people that thought that he'd be really good. I don't think anyone thought he'd be this good on offense. Now, if is that sustainable? I guess we'll have to wait and see. But yeah, clearly he's a really good defensive catcher, and we know he can hit. I just think the power numbers kind of surprise some people, and we'll see if that continues.
Jorge Sedano with us right now, 104.5 The Team, your home for New York Yankees baseball, and part of the big interviews they've done on Nacion ESPN so far, Gary Sanchez. You guys kind of tried to corner him and get him to say whether or not he thought he was Rookie of the Year. Do you think he is, and do you think he spilled it all? Did we miss anything while I'm reading that he may have tipped his hand?
No. Yeah, he didn't say it should be him. I was kind of pressing him. Come on, we know you think it should be you, and he just kind of laughed it off. He was like, whatever you guys vote for, that's not up to me. Blah blah blah. He played it off. But yeah, look, I think he should be the Rookie of the Year, and I know that there's an argument, right, that. Well, he didn't play enough games. That's nonsense, man. He played in enough games to make an impact and almost get the Yankees into the playoffs, right? That in itself, considering where they were when A-Rod stepped away, no one thought they'd even be in the mix after that. We just thought, all right, they'll fade away. They're going to bring in the young guys, and, they'll have their learning curve and some growing pains. And that wasn't the case at all. I mean, and a lot of it was because of his surge offensively. So I think he absolutely deserves to be the Rookie of the Year. There's just not another candidate either that blows you out of the water that played the full season. He had the biggest impact. To me, he's the Rookie of the Year, bar none.
We'll move from the Yankees now to the team that's playing, and that's the New York Knicks. 3 games into the season, the Knicks have beaten the Memphis Grizzlies but lost to the Cavaliers, and then they also lost last night to the Detroit Pistons. A letter grade so far. I know it's early, A through F for the New York Knicks.
I don't know. See, I just don't think this team is going to be as good as some people think. This is the way I look at it, okay? And I talked about this on my podcast, the NBA Lockdown podcast. You can subscribe to it on the ESPN app. Just look on the Listen tab. You'll find it there. So it's me, Amin Al-Hassan, and Izzy Gutierrez, right? We're talking about the Knicks. And I said, look, the reality of the Knicks season comes down to this. They've got several new additions, right? They've got Derrick Rose, Brandon Jennings, Joakim Noah, and then, of course, you have Carmelo. You have Porzingis. I think the kid is going to be a star. I don't think there's any doubt about that. But the other 4 guys, the veteran guys, you've got 4 guys and basically maybe 3 good legs, okay? At the end of the day, when you look at the fact that those guys have been so injury-riddled, Derrick Rose, we know the history, right? Joakim Noah is not the same player he was on defense as he was a couple of years ago when he was the Defensive Player of the Year. And I think as the season progresses, you're going to see that the knee is a huge issue. I know Phil Jackson talked about the shoulder, right? He said, well, I saw him in New York and I made him hang from my arm, just test the shoulder. Yeah, that's all fine and dandy. But what did your doctor say about his knee, which a lot of people feel will never be the same? That to me is a big issue. And obviously Brandon Jennings, teams can have bursts like we saw last night early in the first half against the Pistons, but then what happened the rest of the game to him and Derrick Rose particularly? You didn't see what you saw in the first half. So those guys can give you bursts, but I don't think there's going to be enough consistency there for me to say this team is legitimately a playoff team, no questions about it. I think maybe they can sneak in. Their ceiling to me is about 44 or 45 wins. That's if everybody's healthy the whole season for the most part, okay? But generally, I see them as about a 500 squad, 40 to 41 wins, and I don't see them in the playoffs at that. With those amount of wins, I don't see them making the postseason.
Jorge Sedano with us right here on 104.5 The Team. You can hear him ESPN LA from 6 to 9 Pacific. And, of course, every Monday, Nacion, I can't say it right. I'm not as good as you at this. I'll tell you.
It's Nacion ESPN. And, yeah, look, and the reality is this. Like, you know, I do get a gazillion things now at this company. I cover the NBA for a living. You know, I do the podcast. I'm on SportsCenter talking NBA. I got the radio show in LA. Basically, I moved out of the Northeast because I got tired of all those damn winters. So I was like, the hell with that. So I went out west. So, but whatever you guys want to talk about, we're good. Like, to me, the Knicks thing, I know you guys are big Knicks fans.
Right.
So I'm sorry that I sound like I'm kind of urinating on the parade a little bit, but there's no way you guys thought that this team would be good, right? Like, you guys just think this team, at best, can be a lower seed in the playoffs, right? Like, I'm not crazy to think what I'm thinking.
No, so now when you said 45, I got excited. I'm hoping for the 7th seed.
Okay, good, right. Like, you guys are being reasonable then, because I've had people tell me that they think they can challenge, you know, to get to the Eastern Conference Finals. And I'm like, are we watching the same team? Like, if this team was constructed in 2011 or 2012, maybe we could say that, but not in 2016. Like, those guys aren't healthy enough to get you that far. And by the way, like, there's just a number of teams that are better than them within their own division. Like, Boston is clearly better than them. Toronto is clearly better than them. Like, yeah, I think at best, 7 seed, 8 seed, that's like a good season for them.
All right, so we have a lot of Knicks fans here in the area. We're the home of the Yankees. We're also the home of the New York Jets, and the New York Jets take on a team that used to cover the Miami Dolphins there in South Beach. What franchise needs a win more this weekend, the Dolphins or the Jets?
Whew, that's a great question. Man, I guess the Jets, because they've got the one more loss. I think the reality is that in that town, as you guys know, people sour on you quickly, right?
Right.
So poor Todd Bowles, who did a hell of a job last year, where I thought they overachieved, is going to get criticized for stuff that's beyond his control. It's not his fault that they don't have a quarterback, right? Like, that's not on him. Like, he squeezed the best he could get out of Ryan Fitzpatrick last year, and that was an outlier season. That was an anomaly. That's not who he is. We have a track record for what Ryan Fitzpatrick is. So I would say the Jets, just based on that, because I feel like generally we don't have a lot of patience anymore when it comes to football and football coaches especially. So we kind of discard them very easily. And I would hate to see a guy like Todd Bowles, who I know is a good coach, kind of get pushed aside if this thing goes south quickly.
Jorge Sedano
or further south quickly.
Jorge Sedano with us on 104.5 The Team. The NFL trade deadline was yesterday at 4 o'clock. We're sitting here waiting for anything. Like, we love the MLB trade deadline because stuff happens. Are you shocked that more teams don't make trades before the deadline in the NFL?
No, not shocked at all. Like, because that's the thing. Nothing ever happens. Like, when was the last big trade you saw in the NFL at the deadline? Like, I can't even remember it. Like, that's just kind of the way I look at it. The NBA is kind of that way too. We, occasionally we'll see a trade. If anything, the NBA kind of handles itself more when it comes to the buyouts. But yeah, we don't, right. Baseball is a different ball game when it comes to the transactional stuff. They probably own the transactional space in general, whether it's the winter meetings in December, whether it's the trade deadline. They probably do the best job of that. Then I'd say the NBA, because they obviously blow free agency out of the water. But the NFL, like, you just don't ever really get big trades even in the off season all that much. So none of that is shocking to me. And honestly, considering that the ratings are dwindling a little bit, and there's been some erosion there, maybe that's something that teams need to think of. Like, I'm not saying you force a trade, But if I were the league, I would try to think to myself, like, how do we make this more exciting, even more exciting than it already is? Because people love playing fantasy football, right? Like that's the reason people love transactions so much now in sports, is because they play fantasy or there's gambling implications. And I think the NFL has been slow to warm to all those things, and maybe that's something they need to open the door up to a little more.
Jorge Sedano, he does radio in L.A., podcast for the NBA, Nacion ESPN on Mondays at 5. Am I missing anything? Like, how do you have free time to even talk to us right now?
I don't, actually. I made time for you guys because you know I love you, and you know I'm a radio guy at heart, and I will never stop doing these kind of things. And yeah, look, I just, look, it's better than the alternative, right? I could not be working, right?
Absolutely.
Like that, so.
Yep. Well,
it's not real work.
And I got to be honest, like when with Nacion ESPN, I never thought that it would be a show I would be interested in being, single lingual. But when you get guys like Gary Sanchez, and like you said, you can see him be more comfortable in his native tongue. I got to be honest, I've been paying more and more attention.
Well, the reality is, and thank you for that, it's really the first time we've had anyone on talking Spanish. Generally, the show is, it's in English, the whole show. It just happens to be that the three hosts are Hispanic. And we tackle all the subject matters that all the other shows tackle, whether it's the NFL, the NBA, college football. We probably do a little more baseball, but I think a lot of that has been just the time around the launch was basically right when the playoffs started. But yeah, like the interview stuff, I think that's where you'll see the difference, where if we got a guy who's more comfortable talking in Spanish, we may do it that way and just have the subtitles so you can see the difference. Because I think what happens with a lot of the Hispanic guys, particularly in baseball, they are super, super guarded when they're talking in English, right? Because they just don't know the language all that well, because they're speaking in their second language. Like, I grew up in this country, right? I was born here. So when I speak Spanish, I'm actually thinking in English, whereas these guys are trying to speak English and thinking in Spanish, and it's just not always that easy. So we try occasionally to highlight that stuff. But I appreciate it, man. It's every Monday, 5 o'clock on ESPN2, and hopefully you guys continue to watch and continue to support the show.
Thanks for the time. Gracias. Adios. I'm getting good with my Spanish now from watching.
That's not bad. That's not bad. I like it. Good job by you.
7th grade paid off. I'm saying finally worked.
Sedano, we love you, man. And if you get any free time, rest.
You got it, man. Take care, guys. See ya.